And we're live. All right, creatives, community, kind folks out there. Hello. This is RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. And for those who don't know, each week we particular subject. This time, the general subject of maelstroms, chaos, weather events, celestial events, just storms, horrible storms, and ecological events of all kinds of nature in our tabletop role-playing games. And then a little bit more generally, chaos in terms of handling things at the table. And each day we have a different subject. Monster Monday, Tips and Tricks Tuesday, and today is World Building Wednesday. And so before we start into this, I do want to read a few comments from before in terms of world building. I mean, essentially, these are just very vague themes because they always overlap, especially what we talked about on Monday. But I like to give some brilliant comments always from Joseph Keenan, who always writes in, probably unable to join us live here 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But he says, talking about maelstroms and storms and things of that nature, he talks about a terminal. How about a terminal of a tidally locked world? You have the one side always facing what it is orbiting, like the moon, and he says JPL and others have run simulations of what it might do to an atmosphere. Not as extreme as Jupiter, but you have the extreme hot and extreme cold depending on the orbit, which I like. And I think we've seen that before in various ways in some sci-fi intellectual properties. He says stretching reality a bit could make for a freaky Star Wars type world, with the facing side being a blasted desert, the Terminator being temperate, and the night side being extreme ice. And then he says, add in a wild axial tilt, you have a super exotic world, which I can't disagree with that more. And you could have extremely you could have some extreme weather events on a tidally locked world where the temperate band around the world is probably where everyone needs to like huddle in and stuff. Fat Digital GM says, RPG with DBJ would like to talk to you about an event next month at Fantasy Grounds College. Well, of course, absolutely. I've made the decision that I'm probably dropping Tuesdays, and not dropping it. I will be posting live. I'm going live probably Fantasy Grounds on Tuesdays, but we'll talk. Ricker says won't be able to catch much of the show today either, but wanted to drop by real quick. Well, thank you very much, Ricker. I was mentioning how far north you live to my wife about how in Midsummer, hope I'm not butchering that, but I guess you call it holiday or whatever. The sun never quite sets. It's like a twilight and then it rises again. I think that's just awesome. Although the opposite of that, where the sun never quite gets up into the sky, it's got to be horrible. But yeah, I mentioned that before. When it comes to extreme weather events. Oh, did you see Discord? Yeah, I didn't see the photos. There's a map. Like Deadman says, we got a few amateur cartographers on the Discord mentioning you as well, where I put up the challenge of having a map for, establishing a map for a world, and then having that Discord. Sorry. Having that map change based on the seasons, whatever the seasons may be for your world or something. That might be kind of cool. Let's see if we get back up here, because I remember. Oh, there it is. Yep, with the frozen land and the islands circled by land masses, sandbars or land bars or something up in the corner. Yep, I see it. Sweet. I'm a terrible map maker, and I know. There we go. And there's the island, or the central continent, and kind of leaking up into the. Dude. Oh. Well, how the hell did I get that? Send me a personal. I'll find it. I'm not going to do it right while I'm live, but I will definitely see it. I didn't realize I had a personal message popped in, but yeah, I'll definitely check it out. And and get right back to you. Most likely I won't be going to work the rest of this week because it feels like I'm walking on glass. I'm getting a little tendonitis, arthritic side effects in my ankles and stuff from carrying mail and things. So it's kind of crazy. Rickard says, a world building and weather felt. I mentioned Stormlight Archive. I mean, the world and how cities are built are formed by the fact that they have those storms. I'm not familiar with Stormlight Archive or what intellectual property there is, but I could imagine that there would be plenty of like safe havens, whether it's due to limited locations, faith, magic, technology, knowledge, all of the above in predicting major weather events. Oh, Rickard goes on to say it's the Brandon Sanderson's big epic series. Oh, okay. Why have I not heard about that? I'm going to have to upgrade my geek card. But so you got it, man. You definitely got it. Yeah, if I'm not going to be at work, I mean, I might hang around there as well. I'll be doing a lot of writing too. So yeah, I'll poke my head into the Discord and pop my head in and throw some comments and stuff like that. Especially if I'm writing and I'm home. I'm very rarely home, working 6 days a week. But back to the weather events, since I actually do work outside. Sometimes, as evidenced, brought up by Joe Key in the comment section of videos, sometimes we are our own fault when it comes to certain weather events. Like, for example, there was a period of time here in the States known as the Black Blizzard, where the United States was being farmers were planting crops that did not settle into the soil properly because of their lack of knowledge of the weather systems here. And it became known as the Black Blizzard, where it was so bad that people were I'm reading. PMs in the Discord can be found on the home tab on Discord. You got it. Thank you, Dead Man. So some of us need an education. Those of us that are not too bright or not too don't have a lot of pride when it comes to that. Hey, I need to be educated on these things. Yeah, I'm not a Luddite. I just lack knowledge. I'm ignorant of the fact, not stupid, just ignorant. So there was a period of time in the United States, if you just look up like the Black Blizzard, where after so many people planted, acres and acres, miles and miles of crops and such, that the soil actually lost its nutrients and just began to blow, because the center of the states is very vulnerable to tornado activity. And then that just blew across the landscape, and people were actually dying from the amount of dust that was collected in their lungs just from it. And so maelstroms and storms and uncontrollable things, I think, are great. And as a matter of fact, the idea of having these major storms for a setting, I think, really gives us a tool to use in a game, meaning sometimes the default in some games are the characters are the heroes, right? Oh, there's an obstacle, I'm going to overcome it. Oh, there's a hazard, I'm going to avoid it. Oh, there's a creature, I'm going to defeat it. And if you start out at session 0 with a world battered by storms and such, this would be a great opportunity to basically lay down the law and say, listen, there are going to be things that you cannot defeat simply by standing up to it, right? No matter how much you want to stand in the way of a tornado and not move when it comes, you will probably be killed, right? When 50-foot, storm surge sweeps across the first 5 miles of ocean, and beachfront property and stuff, and you as a PC are like, well, I'm 3rd level, I'm 8th level, it's nothing. Yeah, you could just say, listen, you're probably going to die. There may be we even talked about on Monster Monday how certain weather events will energize or spawn new creatures or get them into a frenzy. We talked about pitch black, where the sun goes down, the planets go away, the stars go out of the sky, and then these creatures come out in the dark to prey upon the masses, and then go for cover when the sun is shining bright, right? That's a thing too. Those nasty headed boulets, the bullets, the land sharks that are underground might come above ground when certain geological events happen or aerial events happen, maybe during storms or whatever, whatever the case may be. If they're drowning in the mud when it rains and they need to come above land, maybe that's what causes them to go into a frenzy. Now, Tesla Ranger says, quote, on May 9th, 1934, a giant storm rose up out of the Great Plains. 1934, okay. A menacing wall of soil and dust headed east across the land, thick enough to block out the sun. And I'm assuming that you pulled that quote. Hey, Kitty. Hey, Sophie. What's going on? I'm assuming you pulled that quote from the testimony of someone or a family or whatever that lived during the Black Blizzard. And while we may not want to bring up in our own games like, hey, PCs, it's your own fault that you're causing ecological damage to your own world, it is a possibility that maybe these are events that have happened either through technology or some kind of hubris because of magic or whatever. For example, maybe wizards that use cold and hot spells and acid spells and lightning bolts and fireballs and things like that are penetrating into other planes of existence, and that penetration has reached its tipping point and it now is just blown over. So yeah, the blazing hot sun, that's an open realm to the plane of radiance and fire. When the reason why it's storming is because there's a open portal to the plane of water where it's not just raining, but literally like millions of gallons of water just splashed down onto the earth or something. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we can get pretty wild with it. And in this case, it may be bringing up, because Joseph Keene even mentioned this too in some of the comments, that weather events are a really great way to ramp up the horror in stories. So if you guys are not familiar with playing horror games, one of the main tropes of a horror game is isolation. 99% of most things that happen in horror movies and horror intellectual properties, the main protagonists are isolated. And now that isolation could be psychological, meaning they're in a place where other people, they can't speak with them, they don't share the same language or common culture. There could be a psychological isolation of depression and loss, but usually it's a physical isolation, a far off cabin, a boat at sea, a stuck in the mountains during snow and they're socked in. The same goes for a hotel in during the winter season. It could be submerged in an aquatic environment. It's an empty spacecraft, orbiting a distant star. It's always isolation. You can't run away from it. And weather has a great ability to lock people in. For example, PCs want to rob a bank during the period of time when a storm is about to roll in to the local coastal area when everyone's leaving and running for cover. And the PCs are like, okay, we've got a 3-day window. They get there, storm makes a turn. Now the PCs are locked into a building with maybe the bottom floors flooding. Plus you have high winds shattering the windows, et cetera, right? Weather, it has a great way of isolating the PCs and also trapping them in with a lot of adversaries. Maybe they're in a cave and there are other creatures that are trying to get away from the rising floodwaters. Maybe the PCs are find an abandoned farmhouse and are locked in with ghosts while there's a hurricane winds outside or dust storms or sandstorms or something. So weather has a great ability to do that. And we all know that we have at least one person a lot of times in our lives, or we've heard stories about the person who's like, oh, my knees hurt, it's going to rain. Or you have a farmer's almanac that predicts certain weather events. We have ourselves those who are in touch with nature, who who cast stones or pull cards or look up into the sky, or they're oracles that can predict weather. There's plain old science. Hey, I've got a barometer, I've got a satellite feed, I've got a drone, I've got, you know, anecdotal evidence of a huge record of the last 800 years of weather events that can predict certain things. So those things can easily foreshadow these events, and by foreshadowing them in your setting, it's a great way for you to basically put on the horizon, you know what? I want to ramp up the danger. Yeah, there's going to be a huge thunderstorm coming forward. I mean, it's going to be torrential rain so bad that it's just going to, you know, snuff out those fireballs and walls of fire or something, and bolts of lightning striking from the sky, and wind so powerful to knock you down when you try to walk from building to building. But I'm going to foreshadow it just in case I think I might need it later on, right? Oh, Caius, what's going on there, man? Caius Glancy says, in the Great Smog of 1954, a period of cold weather combined with an anticyclone and windless conditions formed a thick layer of smog over London that killed 4,000 people and made 100,000 sick. See, those are events like these are things that have happened to our world just in the last 200 years, 100 years. And a lot of that has happened because of us. And a weird confluence of events, like you said, it's like, okay, there was a combination of cold weather and like windless conditions and smog, and all that combined together to create, you know, this thick layer of smog that probably just settled over the land. And it kind of, from my point of view, it kind of reminds me of, I get the impression of the movie version, the fictional version of like a Victorian England, where people, it's like soot covered and there's smokestacks belching out, like, you know, from coal fired from cold fire stacks and furnaces and things. It's like, I just imagine that. And you know, that's about the time when factories were really becoming a huge thing in society, where people were just trudging to work and walking through mud-filled streets and such. I'm not blaming London on this. I'm saying that it reminds me of that era, like a diesel punk, a very dirty diesel punk time in our history. And we could take advantage of that by turning up the volume to 11. You hear me say that a lot. And we could use that in our own games. Who's to say that we imagine ourselves, okay, we're going to take our classic Dungeons and Dragons. Who's to say that some of the races and cultures in the world haven't created the hazards that exist? For example, maybe the gnomes have these, used to have, or maybe still have, these massive factories that are belching out smog that have, you know, spilled over the landscape, combined with weather systems or something that just, like, maybe the snow, it mixes with cold air, goes up into maybe a mountainous region or whatever, and it rains. I mean, there's literally a black blizzard. It literally snows black snow that gets into your lungs. And could you imagine, like, trudging through actually black snow? That'd be quite nasty. Dead Man Storyteller says, nearly every day in the winter months here in Grand Junction, Colorado, is like that cold air inversion. Really? What? See, and of course, we can pull from our own lives, right? We all live in areas of where there's some kind of weather event. And even if the weather is nice, the weather has an effect on other things. Yeah, Vincent says black snow, also known as ash. Yeah, absolutely. Game of Thrones kind of like played with that idea. And, you know, like here, like I'm in central Ohio, and I'm pretty much on the outer edge of Tornado Alley. So we get tornado warnings all the time. Every Wednesday, 12 noon, we have tornado warnings, especially during like the 6 months spring summer season. And we do have tornadoes that kind of reach here, but from northern Texas all the way through the Midwest, like that's Tornado Alley. And but believe you me, that's I don't know if I want to live there. But like Dead Man and Storyteller says, California had an issue with the smoke from the fires. I think they still do. And California, the Sunshine State. Oh, it's great to live here. Earthquakes, fires, and we all know after fires come mudslides. Why? Because all the foliage burns off. There's no root systems to hold the dirt in the land after the fires, and then boom, we get mudslides. It's so it gets so dry there from the lack of rain that essentially there's spontaneous combustion in the foliage itself. And the fact that people live there, that's not nature is going to be what it is. It's our fault living in the way of nature's wrath. Everyone wants beachfront property. No one wants to admit that they're in the path of some heavily major storms. Kaya says in the Triassic time, it rained for 2 million years. That's another thing. You could have, we could make a setting where a particular weather event is happening all the time. Vince says, I'm so happy living in an earthquake and tornado free zone. What a thing. To live in a place where I could even imagine a setting where the people there believe in or remember a time when there was a paradise, and maybe it's humanity themselves that after landing on an alien world or moving to this large continent or what have you, that maybe their own mindset could be their subconscious, could be technology, it could be their links with magic, it could be breaking through to other planes, and maybe everything's just destroyed. So there are no sandy beaches and sunshine. Maybe it's always raining, it's always windy, it's always thunderstorms, it's always blazing hot, and maybe some of those events are happening back to back to back. Some of us live in places, I know here in Central Ohio, and I can imagine, I believe in Colorado this happens, where in the morning it could snow, the middle of the afternoon the snow evaporates and it's warm, and then in the evening you could have hail or rain or something. I believe we've had here 3 or 4 weather events in a single day, back to back to back. It just happens. That it's that north-south confluence. Tesla Ranger says, Tesla's bringing the knowledge now. Dead man, you're losing your step. Tesla Ranger says the year 1816 is known as the year without a summer due to a volcanic winter event caused by the massive 1815 eruption of Mount and such. No. Oh, I am so sorry, guys. I'm getting flashes of messages that the connection's bad. Oh, no, not again. But there could be a number of events that are happening one after another. The year without summer, the 30 days when the sun never rose in the east, the day that it snowed for 30 days and night. Like, you could have these events happening and everyone is just like, oh man, the apocalypse is, it's bad now, but back to back to back, the forthcoming apocalypse is upon us. And maybe literally, and I mean this literally, maybe the world's going to shatter. Like there was a I believe it's Piers Anthony series known as The Shattered World, where you have like floating islands of civilization, and you take these ships covered in dragon scales or dragon bones and stuff and stretched skin that they use to pilot from island to island. That could just be a thing. Vince says, what about the cities are protected from the weather, but outside is extremely dangerous? Are there technological force fields? Are they built into solid granite mountains? Are there cities that walk and move? Maybe they roll or trudge across the landscape. We all know about the failure of the movie, the movie about the traction cities moving across the landscape, attacking each other. But just because the execution of that was bad doesn't mean we can't steal from it. Maybe we have cities that are on wheels or legs or tank treads and stuff moving across the landscape, trying to escape escape from the oncoming storms, and the PCs may belong to or come from different cities that need resources that are very hard to get, and maybe the time and energy to get those resources, everyone's always being pushed to the brink. So maybe there are resources that you have to mine or cull from the atmosphere or the land in a certain amount of time before yet another storm, socks the place in or something. Dead Man the Storyteller says he's just looking up history.com. All right. You got me, Dead Man. Dead Man's like, I've got my book handwritten, chained to my wrist with my dark cloak. You can only see my nose and chin from the shadows. Sorry, that's how I just imagine you. And yes, I'm quite aware that there's a difference between pronouncing it Deadman and Dead Man. Vince says, how would you survive on a world where it is constantly raining? You could only live on places that don't get washed away. Farming would be much more specialized. If it rained, now mind you, if it rained all the time, maybe the rain mitigates a little bit from a mere drizzle to, a downpour to rainstorms where the rain is like slashing sideways. So maybe you could have floating farms or domed farmland where there's like small patches of domed, only maybe no more than a couple of kilometers wide, and you have to batten down the hatches. Maybe it's underground, although I can't imagine. Ooh, subterranean areas would be flooded too. Ooh, nasty. Also, I can imagine where it's constantly raining, the landscape would just keep changing, especially if there was a period of time where it didn't rain in certain areas. So hazards like trees and buildings might be underneath boats and such. And you might have, maybe the adventure is always being in sailing ships that you have to dive down into sunken cities to retrieve things to come back up. That might be a possibility. Dead Man the Storyteller says, see Dauntless computer game for examples of that. They even call the effect the Maelstrom. I'm not familiar with Dauntless. I'll probably look that up. Computer game. I mean, even the idea, like, for example, okay, you could have random dungeons, and I say dungeons with the in quotes, because there's a possibility that, let's say, for example, the PCs go into a town, weather system rolls in for whatever reason, locks everybody in, and now the PCs are now trapped either underground with a bunch of like refugees, or there's a town that's been abandoned because the people are moving on to safe cities. The two Mecha movies, Pacific Rim, the people escaped into safe havens when the giant robots and the Jaegers and Kaiju were fighting above them. Maybe it's the same thing where people go for cover underground, i.e. Dungeons and Dragons, maybe they're dwarven holds that protect people temporarily. And the PCs are like, no, we need to stay above ground for whatever reason, a heist, an enemy, for whatever reason. Maybe they're too late to get down into the safe places where they lock the doors or something, and that kind of thing. Vince says, this reminds me of Forrest Gump. We had all kinds of rains. Yeah. Man, life is like a box of chocolates, especially when it's raining. Caius of Glantry, in one area, the boiling lands, stone evaporates and falls from the sky as lava rains at the borders. Yeah. Undo says farming would be done using aquaponics if they could. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It says, how does that work? Who cares how it works? I mean, if we're going hard science fiction, I'm sure we can come up with some things. I mean, hell, there's a Maelstrom going on right now in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter. There's Maelstrom going on in the moons of, I believe it's Saturn or Jupiter, where the vast gravity of Jupiter, I believe it's Jupiter, it may be Saturn, is squeezing one of the moons so hard that it's erupting ice and carbon, like dioxide or monoxide or something into the upper atmosphere of the moon, hundreds of kilometers for it to just spill back again. I mean, there's the aquaponics and farming and stuff. I'm sure now, mind you, maybe people's diets would change. They probably eat more aquatic type meals and things. Now remember, humanity's pretty adaptable. I mean, we have people who already live in extreme weather places. We have people live tribal lives in nearly every corner of our own world. So we could probably pull from that as well. For example, there are people who live in swamp areas and they've learned to lash together bamboo and other materials to live above the water line when it floods. One of my coworkers, algae shakes. Yeah. Ooh, comes with extra scum on top. I love it. Pass me a spoon. We flavored this one with extra mosquitoes. Well, thank you. There could be one of my coworkers retired and moved to Thailand, and there they prepare for the flood season when not tsunami. Come on, someone reminded me of what the torrential rain season is like, especially there's a torrential rain season in African savanna. And rain isn't our only weather system, right? As you guys look this up for me, we have hurricanes, monsoon season. Thank you, Caius. Monsoon. Oof. How did I forget that? Monsoon season is a possibility as well. For example, your setting. If you think about some of the open plains in Savannah, while it's not quite dark sun-ish as a complete desert region, you turn the volume up to 11. Thank you, Undo, as well. You could have a world where half the year it's blasted desert and the other half the monsoon comes in and floods everything. Like, why couldn't we have a setting? I mean, the thing is that those things are real. Why can't we pull on those? And what a crazy cool way to have players like prepare for a long desert trek, only to come out of the dungeon and find out that it's starting to rain and it just keeps raining. And now on their way home, it's almost an aquatic adventure as they have to figure out how to navigate these small islands of land and creatures that are normally awaiting the monsoon season. And there's a lot of natural flora and fauna that are adapted to that hot, cold, on off type of seasonal change as well. Vince says there's this weird concept hat that consists of tubes full of algae. You can take a sip every once in a while from it and it grows back as long as enough sunlight is present. I did not know that. You mean like the beer hat? That's weird. I guess it's an idea. Listen, I'd rather get my protein from insects than the drink out of an algae-filled beer hat, but whatever. Vince says, exactly. Yeah, thanks. But that could be a thing. That what if especially if it's salt water or poisonous water or something, maybe instead of water skins, there's some kind of like algae or fungal growth in your water skin, and you fill it with water, and you can only drink from it as it purifies it through that osmosis or something, or maybe it's filled with charcoal and sand or whatever. I mean, that'd be an idea as well. Kaya says, I like the idea of a place being completely locked down for months. When the snow's coming, you have to figure out how to get on with whoever you are trapped with. I love that idea so much, because here's the thing, right? You could be trapped with basically your mortal enemies somewhere, whether it's something as large as a major city state or as small as a cabin. Yet at the same time, what if there's a need, a necessity to rely on those you're trapped with? And much like the age of piracy, right? Sure, they sunk a lot of ships through the age of piracy, but they also needed crew members. They also needed the cargo from ships. So it wasn't just, well, I'm just going to, like in our classics, like sci-fi settings, oh, I'm just going to blow the ship out of the sky, or in space, I'm just going to hit it with torpedoes. Maybe those things are necessary. So if you're trapped somewhere, maybe those people that you're trapped with are very capable at survival. And they're looking at you like, well, we need you and you need us, but when we get out of here, we're going to kill each other. I like that. Plus, again, we can ramp up the horror of being trapped in a location with something else and having it, going outside might not be the best for everyone, especially, let's say you're like Kaius brings up cold, right? I mean, it could be brutally cold, to the point where simply running outside could lead to frostbite in mere minutes, seconds even. On television, there's plenty of times when the newscasters are like, oh, the temperature's so cold, we've got a bucket of boiling water, and they throw it in the air and it turns to ice crystals, right? That kind of thing. Undo says, better kill the lich and get out of the dungeon before the monsoon starts, or you will not get out whether you win or not. Yeah, exactly. Especially if like PCs are like, we killed everything in the dungeon, I guess we're going to have to wait. Well, so all of a sudden you find out, wait, do you guys remember getting the phylactery? Nope. What do you mean you didn't get the phylactery? I thought you were going to get it. Lich comes back to life, brings everything back in the dungeon again, and PCs are like face palming, like, oh, and we can't leave. Vince says, my fungi bag is fully grown again. Stew for breakfast. Just imagine it looking like just, oh man, taking a fork inside of your drinking bag and it's like overcooked spinach or something. Oh man. Finn says, flood the dungeon before entering is a popular strategy. Imagine being in one when another party tries that. Yeah. Hey, you could be in a dungeon. And I know Rob that it's with Critical Hit with us. He had a dungeon that was flooding, and the PCs had to navigate the dungeon before the dungeon completely flooded. And you could even play with a classic dungeon where you could have miniature waterfalls, rooms filled with water, air pockets, the need to swim down tunnels to get to maybe rise up a set of stairs or go through a trap door to get to air, another place with air. There could be panicked creatures and sentient things inside the dungeon scrambling to get out of the flooding locations. There could be rooms filled to the waist that are like with debris floating in the water and then things brushing against someone's leg. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Don't get trapped in a real dungeon with locked cage doors and all of a sudden the PCs are locked away and then it starts to flood and the guards are just like, they just drop the keys on the floor and run for it, and the PCs are like, I can't reach the keys, and it's just flooding a little bit, and the game master rolls a die and goes, okay, now the water's at your ankle length, and yep, it's been long enough. Now it's at your calves. Oh, it's at your knees. Okay, it's above your thigh. It's at your waist. What are you going to do? That would be sweet. What a great method to push the tension further. And I know we're kind of not world building here. We're kind of doing third pillaring right here, but I do feel like that's something that, especially if the people who live in this world that we're building with the storms and such are familiar with it, and sure, circumstances can push people in a direction where they're still stuck in the storms. For example, we have people who live on beachfront property that gets hit with storms. We have people who live in Tornado Alley or near earthquakes or monsoons or floods places and frigid cold. We already know that people live there. It could just be a number of circumstances that force people out into those dangers before everyone locks themselves away or battens down the hatches or prays for protection or whatever have you. Especially in sci-fi. Of course, when we hit Future Friday, we have so many exoplanets we can play with in terms of like poisonous snows and methane gases and all that kind of stuff, and frozen temperatures that fall towards absolute zero and stuff. Dead Man the Storyteller says the freezing water in the air like that is an effect of the cold air in the high surface area of the water. Oh yeah, because once the it's difficult for the bucket of water to freeze, but once you throw the bucket of water into the air, the cold temperature is able to surround all the particulates, i.e., turning it into snow essentially, or ice crystals and stuff. Yeah. Vince says, sounds like a fun idea. Suddenly everyone is envious of the trident. Yeah. Or what was the name of the new aquatic race? The Tritons. There's also the water genasi, but I know there's another aquatic race. I can't remember it for Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, absolutely. If you're hey, it's the Aquaman syndrome, right? Everyone thinks Aquaman is is a pansy ass until the place starts flooding, and he just like looks at everybody with his arms folded and has like a devilish grin, like, yeah, I'm not worried about this. Also, with a setting that has a huge like maelstrom and stuff, to be honest with you, you can go two ways with this. You can go very detailed, like I mentioned before, that Johansson probably picked up the challenge, and that is you could have multiple maps for your world based on the weather during that season. You know, cold, storms, rain, heat, whatever the case may be, right? There might be a series of island archipelagos during one season, and then it might literally be a peninsula during another season when the ocean or river waters like subside or something. You could have a place that's blasted by cold, and then during another season it's I don't know, jungle like because of the snow melt or whatever, and it causes great growth or whatever. So you could have that. Now another method that requires a lot of detail. If you want to have your world where the PCs, for 1 month you traveled north, when you come back down south, it's completely different. Now the other method is you could actually put chaos in the back pocket. I mean, what a great tool to have as a GM to say, yeah, wherever you travel, you really don't know what's going to be there, and you could come up with things on the fly, kind of like the PCs go into the desert. Oh, well, yeah, the desert's flooding. PC scratch their head. This doesn't make any sense. You as a game master go, here's history.com. Here's the nature channel. Here's what a desert looks like when it floods. So yeah, I'm not making this stuff up, right? Vince says Aquaman got pushed super hard recently to be cool. Yeah, gotta go sadly. Sorry about that, man. Hey, later, Vince. Fat Ninja's DM still burning his lip with his coffee. Yeah, I know. I see you. I definitely see you. Sorry. Taking a pause. I really did need to do that. Almond milk. Very vanilla. Anyway, Aquaman did get pushed cool. And the reason Aquaman got pushed to the cool kids table is because if you really think about it, Aquaman's a kick-ass character. I mean, he got made fun of. Oh, he only can speak to fish. But if you can survive the pressures of the deep ocean, like you're a kick-ass kind of character, right? If you're arm wrestling, you're wrestling sharks. Let's just say that you're not a secondary character, right? You get to pull the table up and push everybody aside at the cool kids table. So here we have let's go a little bit more. Let's go even more exotic with our Maelstrom idea. Okay, so we live on Earth, the land. We walk along the land and we look up in the sky, and things come down from the sky, whether it's celestial. We talked about celestial events before, about day-night cycles. We can mess with day-night cycles, stars, moons, comets, meteor showers, things like that. So we could mess with that as well. But who's to say that we have to limit ourselves with that? So for example, maybe the weather comes from beneath us. So weather could rise up from our ankles, Or if we have a shattered world where we have islands, it could be that we need to take airships from the floating land masses may not all rest in the same plane of gravity. So one landmass might be over top of another landmass, moving in random sequences or through predictable sequences over periods of days, months, years, centuries. And so maybe one landmass spilling its dirt and moisture and oils and waste is spilling down over top of another landmass that's so large, maybe continent size, that it creates a maelstrom underneath one island to another one. Or you could even have floating islands in the sky where each island is being buffeted by storms that you can see on the horizon, almost like a landmass floating in the elemental plane of air. And I know many of you have seen storms come in on the horizon where you look up in the sky, you see sunshine, but on the horizon, you see this dark band of clouds, and you're just like, you're shaking your head like, oh man, this is terrible. I remember when I was in college at I I was taking pre-college classes at University of Pennsylvania, and they had college dorms, and I think they were like 20 stories tall, maybe a little bit taller than that. And the upper floor was the student area where you could just hang out and study. And they had 270-degree windows. I think that's 3/4 windows, and everybody would go up there to watch the storms roll in because you could see the storms coming up from the east, coming up the East Coast. And it was a great image because you would see almost, it was almost like boiling water, but seeing it from beneath. And you could see the lightning flashes across the horizon and stuff. So that is a possibility that you could have weather events come in, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up or through the side or something like that. Dead Man, the storyteller, says illusion of Gaia. Old SNES old Nintendo game had a comet that mutated everything. Oh, you mean like a I don't remember the game, but I do know that there are lots of wives' tales and things of the coming of a comet, the passing of a certain star in the sky, at its highest point, the a red planet or something. Like, there are celestial events. How could we forget total eclipses, lunar and solar eclipses, multiple moons, multiple suns, binary star systems, and things of that nature. So we can play with that as well, especially when we get into Future Friday. We're going to talk about solar flares, radiation, nebula, quasars, supernovae, black holes, that kind of thing. So it could be, we could go completely arcane with the idea that when certain planets are ascended or descended in the sky, certain star systems, comets that come far more frequently than maybe every like 70 years, maybe they come every couple of days. Maybe there's certain colors of meteors or comets or something in your setting that foretell of certain things. Like we mentioned before about what if there each moon and sun and star is associated with something that happens on the earthly plane. So what was the quote? Oh, we better take cover. The dragon moon is high in the sky this evening or something like that, where, aberrants come out because, I don't know, the ebony moon is in the sky. Plant life comes to life because of the green star. Giants roam the land because of the white moon or something. Like you could have like a random table or a calendar where certain things become ascended and descended into the sky and whatnot, along with playing with celestial events like sunrise and darkness and the sun. I mean, we know our planet revolves around the sun, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. I have a setting where the sun always remains in the same place in the sky. It it's literally the physical representation of the plane of radiance and the plane of negative energy, basically shadow as well. So it just spins. So at night it's a black disc with a light band around it, and during the day it's a white disc with a black band around it, because the opposite side is shining. So you could play. We could make up a setting where maybe certain hazards are during the daylight hours. You have one hazard. During the nighttime hours you have other hazards. So during the daylight hours you might have things like salamanders, sphinxes, fire elementals, efreet, steam and lava and fire methods or something. And then during the nighttime hours you could have shadow demons and shadows and other things that go bump in the night, and they may never cross paths with each other, although there might be a little bit of a terminus as the sun rises and sets, or it becomes occluded by the moon of the dark god or what have you. But you could also play with those events as well, where you have celestial events and the people are like, I'm going to bring up Within the Ring of Fire again, where each day there's 77 thrones. Each day is a certain throne. You have the 77-day cycle where each specific day in that 77 cycle represents one of the particular gods on the throne. So if the 34th day is the god of pigs, and the 87th day, even though there's 77 thrones, but you get what I'm saying. If you have an 87th day, that is this day of ravens, and the third day is the day of sorrow or something. Each day, when that cycle goes all the way back around again, maybe that event happens in your world. For example, in the day of sorrow, instead of a weather maelstrom chaos event, maybe there are waves of basically sadness and depression that roll across the landscape. And if people don't take precautions, huddling together with their families, maybe people are overcome with sadness and they just want to sleep away. I'm oversimplifying a real psychological problem, but we're talking something fantastical and arcane. So maybe during the day of sorrow, people don't do their work. No one farms. People stay at home. Maybe during the day of ravens, there's just flocks and flocks of ravens and, eating dead flesh and carrion or something, and people hiding in their homes because of the air quotes, the maelstrom that is taking place across the landscape. And again, I'm going to reemphasize that yes, Kitty, I'm giving you head scratchies. Come on. That's why I have a chair next to me. Come on. So a maelstrom does not necessarily need to be a physical manifestation of just weather that we know it, but we can have other manifestations. And especially if you're in your setting, your session 0, maybe your world is just flooded with something. Top of my head, right? Hundreds of thousands of basilisks come out of the mountains and roll across the landscape, right? So in a normal setting, the PCs are like, wait, hundreds of thousands of basilisks? Yeah, hundreds of thousands. It's their migratory move going from east to west or something, and it's the migration of the basilisks, and you could make that your type of maelstrom event where PCs, you're not going to stand up to these things on your own. You're going to literally have to take cover, and you could make monsters and creatures or animals the hazards of the world, right? During particular season, maybe there's a mating season, and as the manticores come out of the forests and the mountains, they go to mate, and the people were just like, it's mating season for like a month with these manticores. We just need to take cover. Hey, there's idiot. I mean, there are brave adventurers. Maybe they can take our foodstuffs in a caravan across the land, because we need to get them to the other side of the mountain range while dozens upon dozens of manticores try to breed with each other and fight over dominance territory. And what are those? What is that, food? I love Paladin, especially when you crack open the shell. I mean, there's so many things that you can play with in terms of making. I guess I guess to summarize, which I guess I should have summarized this to hell in the first 2 minutes of the video, is the idea that your environment is the thing that the players cannot. You can't hit it with a stick. You can run from it, you can hide from it, you can try to survive it, but it's the thing that is ever present in the world. And instead of, I mean, in many ways, we tend to, some of our gaming locations tend to always be room temperature. Oh, we're just dressed in clothing and we're just going to go from A to B. We don't really think of, oh, I need to put on my rainy season gear. I need to put on my winter gear. I need to take off my clothing because it's blazing hot, right? We don't tend to think about those things. We really don't incorporate a lot of, oh, it's not just encumbrance I need to think about. It's I need specifically rain. I need to protect my belongings from the oncoming rain monsoon season, or I need to find a backpack that is buoyant for my belongings while I walk chest deep through muck and rain and swampy areas. We tend not to think about that. We don't think about snow blindness or sunburn and whatnot, which brings me full circle into the cinematic environs. I wonder who made those. Oh yeah, me. Well, not just me, myself, Alex, Rob from Critical Hit Publishing, and that's the whole point of creating the cinematic environs, that third pillar of gaming. And of course, this subject was brought up by Dead Man, the storyteller, which I appreciate that very much, Dead Man. And bringing that up is just the idea that we just have one more tool to bring into our settings, especially if we want to use some of our lesser used creatures. Maybe we've always wanted to use, I'm going to butcher the name, Sahogan, the humanoid shark people, or lizard men, or troglodytes, or I don't know, those lamprey-faced people or something. And in your gaming world, like, man, I've always wanted to do an aquatic adventure, but it's always, I mean, I have a landlocked world. Well, maybe it just rains for 5 years or something in this particular region. Maybe the PCs cross the mountain range and they see the snow, the snow. They see the storm clouds over top of the mountain range in this region that just rains constantly. And maybe now you have the ability to go, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to incorporate these things in my world. I'm going to incorporate these things because the storms have brought them here, as well as just making your travel just hazardous, right? Some of the math in Dungeons and Dragons is something like 6 to 8 encounters per long rest, I think is what it says. And having 6 to 8 monster fights is a little bit ridiculous. That's almost like going to war. But an encounter could be an encounter with flood, avalanche, storms, sandstorm, all those kind of things. Undo says, I'm going to friggin' learn how to pronounce your friggin' name there, dude, because I think it's undeserving. But anyway, Undo says there should be a week oriented towards tools. They're often overlooked, and we as humans are very tool oriented. I will take that under advisement, very seriously. Yes, we are extremely tool heavy. If going so far as to grab things nearby us, like, don't we? Oh, Dead Man Story says uno, dos, tres, cuatro. Yeah. I didn't see. This is where the idiocy comes through. Oh, wow. Staring me right in the friggin' face. Thank you, Dead Man. I need you here. I think I'm gonna download you, Dead Man, and put you like a grain of rice in the back of my head right attached to my cortical stack. Just but yes, we are very tool oriented, and it's possible that in some of us, I love survivalist settings, not all the time, but there are survivalist settings. Dark Sun is a very popular one. Mad Max, post apocalyptic type settings, and the draw for some of those settings is I made the name just for this moment. Man, that's the long game. Jeez, that's the long game. I love it. Um, and yes, I was staring at it and did not read it. I mean, like I literally didn't see it. So yeah, you got me. But the long game. God, you squirreled. The idea of a post-apocalyptic style setting, like we're talking about maelstroms and storms destroying the landscape, reshaping it, whether we talked about a black blizzard, and Caius brought up the confluence in London and volcanic activity in Indonesia and those kind of things. And one of the draws that players that love those type of settings, it's not quote unquote getting more powerful, getting more magic items, getting more special abilities and stuff. It's the idea of finding the right tool, finding a little bit more food, finding another cloak because my last one, ripped to shreds, finding a pair of boots that works, finding the last can of dog food that's on the shelf and sharing it, like Mad Max style, sharing it with your pet dog and yourself as you both are eating it with a rusty spoon, right? It's the I tried as hard as I could to find this thing, and maybe this thing is a small stream of clean water, or a first aid kit, or a piece of fruit from a dying tree or something. And so, much like Undo brought up tools, finding proper tools that, because your other stuff is broken down. I shattered my club that I made through a piece of rusted metal or from an old tree branch. Wow, I actually found a sword. Sure, it's a little bit pitted and the tip is broken off, but I love it. I found a pistol and it's got 3 rounds. I'm going to have to save this for later. So it's somewhat the idea of, like, it's strangely being naked and finding a set of clothing rather than being the hero and finding a bigger gun. And I think that draws people to that kind of survivalist idea. And with a Maelstrom type setting, I feel like you could play with that idea. So again, with this, let's talk about our rainstorms, thunderstorms, high winds and such. Finding a backpack that is sealed against the heavy amounts of moisture, or that floats on the surface of all the flood waters and lakes and ponds that are in this region, in that type of setting, is perfect. It's like, oh great, I found something I can, I'm tired of getting, foot rot because my boots are always soaked. I finally found something that's watertight, those kind of things. Maybe constantly eating fish and high aquaponic foods are just like, oh, I'm bored with that. Oh, I found a chocolate bar. I found a dry piece of bread. Wow, that's great. So anyway, guys, we reached the hour mark. I'm off to make an appointment, hopefully make an emergency appointment to go to an orthopedist, see something about this ankle, because it's literally killing me. It's like walking on glass or something. So I have to do something like that. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you, thank you, uno, dos, tres, cuatro, for leading, doing the long game. Thank you, Dead Man, for being like just shaking your head. I actually see you digitally shaking your head like, this dude, he just doesn't see anything. He just doesn't get it. So thank you very much for not throwing my ignorance in my face too often. But sometimes I need it. Fat Ninja DM, we will talk. I'm going to go in after this, click this off, go into the Discord, find out some information, and make my phone calls. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. I will see thee later. See you tomorrow. Bye.